Welcome to Not in the State with me, National Core. In today's episode, we want to continue the discussion on buying of a house. And in the previous episode, we talked about, we began the discussions around what you need to check when you're buying a house. And we talked about two critical areas you need to check when buying a house: the history of the developer, and we talk about the project execution team. In today's episode, we want to talk about two other areas as well, as we dissect this discussion on what you need to check when you're buying a house. Just to remind you that I've talked about this in depth in my book, Don't Buy That House. You can get it online, you can get it on Nuria and Rafu, you can get it on Amazon. In this, I've talked about in depth of what you need to check, the 7 critical areas that I'm discussing in these 4 episodes that you need to check when buying a house. So, history of developer, project execution team, very critical things that we looked out in the previous episode. And if you haven't listened to it, please find and listen to it. Very critical things you must check in the history of developer and the projects team. Today, we want to talk about approvals, statutory approvals, and the sale agreement. Those are the 2 critical things that we want to talk about that you must tick before buying a house. Now, let's begin with the construction approvals. And construction approvals, there are a number of them. Yeah, the law requires any project to have an EMA license, and then there's the county approvals. Then you have the National Construction Authority approval. If a building is on a riparian or near a water reservoir area, the law requires that it must have a WARMA, Water Resource Management Authority approval. If a building is on a flight path or next to an airport, the law requires that it must have the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority approval. Those are the construction approvals required under the law. And I want to look at them in depth on how you need to check that before you pay a penny to a project, how you verify that a project has the requisite approval, because that is very important. If not, you will not have a remedy. I mean, in 2018, you saw the demolitions that were happening on riparian reserves. You saw how painful people lost their businesses. Yeah? And simply because a lot of those projects were not approved by the government. You've seen a lot of buildings going down, buildings collapsing, and authorities coming to say time and again that these projects were not approved. Part of the critical documents you must have in your possession when buying a house are the statutory approvals. Those documents must be in your possession. So let's jump straight into it. So the first approval I need you to always check is the county government. Every county government, the 47 of them, it's under the law that the Physical Planning Act, that the county governments must approve drawings. And usually it is the architectural drawings that are approved and the structural drawings. Those 2 drawings are always approved by, must be approved by the county. I know in some counties they always ask also for mechanical, electrical, although it's not a legal requirement. So architects approve drawings by the county, structural engineers approve drawings by the county. You must check that they're in your possession. All right. There are different systems for approving drawings at the counties. I think Mombasa, Nairobi, and Kiambu, and I think Kajiado have the online system. So you'll find a QR code, like in Nairobi, a QR code on drawings that you can scan to just verify authenticity of that drawing. Other counties are still on hard copies, so you'll find these blue drawings that you have. Please ask your lawyer or whatever it is, ask the developer to give you the county approved drawings of the development. All right. Number 2 is the change of use. Change of use. Now, let me elaborate this for you. Change of use is important because a number of plots in that we do multi-dwellings, you'll find they were for single dwelling units. Some you'll find were agricultural land. Some will find were apartment land. So you want to do, the developer is doing a mixed use. You must get the change of use document. Yeah, the change of use is done at the county first, then it proceeds to lands. So if this title was single dwelling, the developer is doing an apartment, you want a document that shows that the county has approved the change of use from single dwelling to apartment. It is important. Now, change of use comes before approvals by the county because the county always requires the change of use document to approve the county drawings. So it's a finish to start. The change of use must be finished before county approved drawings. But I know sometimes in some counties they do it together. So change of use document, we call it PPA2. It's usually a pinkish form, pinkish document, PPA2 document. You must have in your possession that the developer obtained the requisite approval for change of use to do the project he's doing. That is the second document you must have, change of use. Now, after the county drawings are approved, and you can check these things. Some of these things, just check them. When you see the county drawings, normally they are stamped, technical committee stamp, public health stamp. You'll find the engineers department, fire department. You'll find a number of those stamps on the drawings. Look, I know we're in a country where some of these things can be forged, but please, at least, even if you will be caught, just check that you tried to check and at least the drawing was there, stamps were there, but stamps were fake. That's a better place to be rather than saying, I did not check. Right? Now, change of use checked, drawings are approved by the county checked. Next is NEMA. All right? Depending on the size of the building, depending on the magnitude of the building, NEMA approved buildings in two ways, depending on the risk of the building. There are some that will, if developer is doing 100 units and over, usually it requires a NEMA approval of, we call it a full NEMA audit, a full EIA. They must do it on the newspaper and advertise and all those things. So the bottom line is, whether it is a big development or small, NEMA must approve the development. So ask for NEMA approval. After checking that NEMA has approved development, the next thing you need to check is the National Construction Authority approval. NCA by law must register projects. So every development, residential, commercial, whatever nature, must be registered by the authorities. And the authority issues a license that shows it has been registered by NCA. So usually when a project is on site or they have started construction, please check that and ask them to give you the National Construction Authority license, the document that shows that NCA has gone through the project. They have verified the consultants, because NCA also checks the consultants, the contractor, and that is in place. That is another approval you need to check. Another critical one is WARMA. Now, whenever you're buying a building that you go to site and you see it's next to a river, it's next to a water catchment area, it's next to a lake, next to an ocean, the law requires the Water Resource Management Authority to issue a license, what we call the WARMA license, actually to deal with the riparian. That will define the riparian reserve. The riparian reserve usually defined in law between 4 meter to 30 meter. So you want to just check that the development has WARMA license, that the authority has approved, and where the building is starting is actually where the building needs to start. It is not being built on riparian reserve. So WARMA approval, very critical for you. Lastly is the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, which most people forget, that KCAA is required to approve buildings that are around airports, that are around airstrips, that are around flight panels. There are certain areas in this around airports where you cannot do a certain height of buildings. So whenever you are buying a project around this kind of airstrips, airports, please ask for the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority approval letters, just to check that the height being built is approved. Otherwise, you will buy into a project not approved by KCAA. By the time the project is complete, it's being brought down. That is a very critical approval that you must check. So those are the key approvals you need to check before you buy a development. Let me go through them again. Change of use by the county. The county approved drawings, both architectural and structural drawings, right? NEMA license, National Environmental Management Authority license. WARMA, if the building is on a riparian reserve. National Construction Authority, all projects must be registered by them. The Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, all projects on airstrips, on flight funnels, those critical. Now, that is one aspect. So far we discussed three: history of developer, right? And as project execution team in the previous episode. We talk about the approval, statutory approvals here. Now let's talk about the sale agreement. Now, the sale agreement, in my view, it's the most important document when you're buying a house. And I want you to take your time here. It's a very critical document that you must interrogate with the toothpick when you are buying a house. Because this is the umbilical cord, this is the shackle, this is what ties you down. And the second critical things I want to mention about sale agreement that you must watch out for. And the things I'm going to mention are not things that the lawyers will tell you. The lawyer will not tell you. They are not your commas and full stops. They are not your legal language in the sale agreement. No. There are certain things that requires you as a person, as a buyer, to know that sometimes the lawyers will miss. All right. So I want to go through certain aspects in the sale agreement, that things that you must watch out for, that you must tick in the sale agreement before you buy a house. All right. Number one, check that the project and the house is well captured in the sale agreement. I mean, it sounds so obvious, but I've been on projects where the sale agreement says house A2, all right, while on site is something else. Or the sale agreement says you're buying a 3-bed and yet you're buying a 2-bed, or you're buying a 4-bed. Just check that the project and the house in the sale agreement is well captured. The project details, the title number in the sale agreement. These things are obvious, but they're very critical. Tick those. The house number, very important. The project title is very important. Who is selling? Sometimes you'll find, is the person selling in the sale agreement the same as the person who owns the land? Those two things must tally. Whoever is selling for you the house must own the land. And not sometimes developers will tell you, no, we're in the process of transferring. If that is the case, please hold on until the transfer is done. All right? So check that the house and the project details are very well captured in the sale agreement. All right? The land status. The land registration status. All right? Very key, very important. And I mentioned it previously briefly. Who is selling the land? Who is selling the development, not the land? Who is selling the apartment? Is the person who sells the apartment similar to the person who owns the land? Most of the times, sometimes for the phony developers, you'll find they are not the same. Or they'll tell you, no, we're in the process of transfer. No, wait until the transfer is done, because what if the transfer doesn't go through? So the name of the person in the sale agreement that is selling should tell you the person who owns the land. There's no two-way around that. Do not buy into a property that do not own the land. The company that sells the house must be the company that owns the land. Those two must tally. If there's a transfer ongoing or delaying, please, there's no hurry. Wait for that transfer to complete. Because I have witnessed projects where that transfer didn't complete. So there are disputes, comes, whatever it's family, whatever it is. You sold to X company do not, at that point, don't own the land. The land is still with the previous owner. And then you're just in a quagmire. Right? So always be patient to ensure if the transfer is not yet through, let the transfer go through, so that you, whoever owns the land, must be the person selling. Right? Another thing important for the sale agreement is the duration of construction. A number of developers always want to leave it so open. Please just check it through ahead, that the duration of construction is well captured in the sale agreement. How long is the project being built? And please ensure there are not ridiculous clauses that allows that duration to be changed arbitrarily. Yes, as a project manager in construction, I know things happen and things can come and change a lot the completion of a project. Yes, those things are allowed for, just like between the contractor and the developer, those eventualities are allowed for. But when this project needs to complete, should not be in doubt. And if there are things that will make it not be complete, those can be allowed for in the sale agreement. Most sale agreements do not allow for these things. It's so open, and developers play around with it a lot of the time. So just check that the duration of the project is well captured in the sale agreement. When is the project completing? When is it starting? When is it completing? After checking the duration of the project, the second part, the third part you need to check is what I would call the payment plan. And I want to elaborate something here. I am pro milestone method of payments for houses. And let me explain. A number of sale agreements requires buyers to to make payments on a monthly basis. Now, the problem with monthly payments on off-plan, for example, is not pegged on progress. Yeah, and monthly payment has been the emblem of pain and suffering for most buyers in this real estate market. Monthly payment is not pegged on progress. You will pay on a monthly basis whether there is work going on or not. And rationally, when you'll find work is not going on, then you'll stop. And the developer will issue the notice telling you, listen, you're defaulting on payment, and yet there's no progress. And it's also an avenue that has made most developers get away with so much in conning people in real estate. So I am not always for monthly payments. I am always for milestones. Milestones payment is I pay you a deposit, and we agree on milestones on this project for the next 1 year, 1.5 years. So for example, it could be casting ground floor, casting first floor, it could be windows, could be tiling, as milestones on the development. And when the developer does those milestones, then I make the payment. You realize that if in this case there's sort of some bulletproof that if the developer stops, then I've only paid for what is done up to that point. That is what I prefer. Milestone payment is my preferential payment, and if a developer is very honest about completing the project, they should not have a problem with this. Monthly payments will give you problems every day, yeah, especially when the developer is not making good progress on site. They will expect you to pay whether there's progress or not. And when you default in paying, when you refuse to pay, they will be the first to give you a letter of default of payment. All right. So just check the payment details. How is it structured? The deposit payment, the advance payment, whatever it is we are paying, and then structure the balance if possible. Structure it based on milestone payments. Agree on 10 milestones for 10 years, for 1 year, or 14 milestones for the 14 months, and the developer needs to reach those milestones before you make the payments. That in the sale agreement, it's a very safer way for buyers to ensure that whatever you're paying for on the project is what needs to be paid for, and the developer has built that effect. So that's another critical area to check. Then there's the occupation of the house. Now, here I need you to be careful. The law requires, there are two documents I need you to master. There is the architect certificate of practical completion, and then there is the occupation certificate. The architect certificate of practical completion signifies that the project is complete for the developer and the contractor. So issues the certificate. And then there's occupation license now issued by the county. As much as possible in the sale agreement, please peg the last payment on occupation certificate. Most developers will want it pegged on the architect certificate of practical completion and not occupation. Now, this is a risk. If it's pegged on the architect certificate, what if it doesn't get the occupation? You understand my point? And that is the risk that you risk running into. Yeah? Let this house be practically complete, yes, but also certified by the county as with an occupation certificate that is habitable under the law for you to make the last payment. So the last payment on the project needs to be on certificate of occupation by the county. That is very important. Also, ensure that those two documents are well captured in the sale agreement. A number of times they tend to conflate the two. Deliberately for most developers, because they know most buyers do not understand, so they mix up the two, and most buyers end up making all the payments and all necessary payments with the certificate of the actual certificate of practical completion, and forgetting about the occupation. Remember, even after that, there is a defects period. Yeah, there's a defects period that's supposed to be coming up 6 months in law, that the developer with the contractor needs to be responsible for all the defects. So that is another part that you need to really check in the sale agreement, that the access certificate of practical completion marries with the occupation certificate, and as much as possible, make the last payment when the county has issued the occupation license. That's when the last payment needs to come. Do not make it on this, because what happens sometimes is this certificate of architect's completion sometimes can be issued prematurely. When a developer pegs the last payment of buyers on the architect certificate of practical completion, sometimes because on this one he has control, he pays the architect, he pays the contractor, he who pays the piper calls the shot. So it can be issued prematurely. If the payments are paid on it and the developer runs out of cash, he can tell the architect, and I've seen it in many projects, this is practically complete, give a certificate of practical completion. And the architects, because of ethics issues, will issue it. All right? And yet the project is not practically complete. And then you make your final payments on a project that practically is not complete. All right? So I am against the issue of making the payment on the architect's certificate of practical completion. Make it on the occupation. Occupation, at least you are sure there's a third party that's coming to check. So yes, there's a risk of corruption, yes. But at least have the comfort that the county have checked and they've given certificate of occupation. That should be the point you make your last payment for this project. So check that in the sale agreement. As much as possible, verify that. Then there's what I would call hidden costs in the sale agreement. There are a lot of areas in the sale agreement that developers hide costs for buyers. And sometimes they seem so small, they seem so minute, that you don't feel them. You don't feel them. I mean, I've seen sale agreements where developers are charging for water meter, power meter. And I had a run-in with one lawyer sometimes when I was representing a buyer. And I asked the lawyer, what is a house? By definition, what is a house? Because a house must have a meter. It must have a meter, it must have power meter and water meter. But you'll find the certain costs that developers hide in the sale agreement. Yeah, water meter, power meter. I've seen some developers charging for occupation license. You can imagine, I bought a house for 10 million. I mean, what is buying a house? It means I will have occupation. Yeah, and for heaven's sakes, a lot of counties, when you pay for approval, county approvals, you pay plus occupation, but they still charge you some fee on the sale agreements. So there's a lot of some hidden costs in sale agreements, and sometimes they look so small, 5,000, 10,000, but if you extrapolate it on 100 units, 200 units, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. So just check the sale agreement that there are no hidden costs in the sale agreement. The costs that are there are things that really needs to be there, and there's nothing you're being charged extra than what you've already paid for. Because a house should come complete. A house should come with power, a house should come with water, a house should come with occupation. There's nothing else someone else should charge you outside that. Legal fees, yes. Those are things that are standard for charging. So check that there are no hidden costs. The last thing in the sale agreement is check the defect liability period. Between handing over for you the house, the developer needs to be responsible for 6 months of defects in the project. All right? Now, you must understand that defects period starts when the architect issues the certificate of practical completion, not occupation. All right? So the day the architect signifies to the team through the license, the certificate of practical completion, 6 months starts from there. 6 months period with which the contractor is responsible for rectifying defects on your house. Now, I always say in the sale agreement, make it explicit in the sale agreement that the developer needs to notify you as a buyer when the architect issues certificate of practical completion. That email needs to come to you. Because trust me, if you come 3 months after that period, you only have 3 months left. If you come 6 months after that period, you have 0 time left. It doesn't matter. The contractor will be out of sight. he will not be responsible. And you'll begin to rectify a lot of your defects with your money. So there has to be, the sale agreement needs to be explicit. Yeah, it needs to be very clear that the developer must notify you when the certificate, architect certificate or product completion has been issued, because that contractual is what signifies the start of the defects period, not the occupation, not the occupation license. So make those adjustments to the sale agreement. Very important for you. Very important for you. So in the sale agreement, please, let me just run through it again. Check those key important things. The project and the house, well captured. Check that the duration of construction is well stipulated. All right? Check the land issues. Who is selling? That they own the land? Correct name, correct title. Check all those critical things. The house payment plan. If possible, have it on milestone, not monthly. Check the occupation licenses. Check the hidden cost of the project. Those things are critical for you to tick in the sale agreement. So, project statutory approvals, interrogation of sale agreement. In this episode, very important things to tick before you buy a house. Thank you.